I'm Dave Bush, and we're talking about the Internet. And you may already know about what the Internet is. You may understand how it works. And you may even be on the Internet and have access to it. But you still may be asking yourself, so what? What's in it for me? What can I do with the Internet? How can I actually get some use out of it? So what we're going to talk about is using the Internet. With the goal in mind, how can I use the Internet? For my business or as a person, as an individual, how can I use the Internet? And we're going to talk about email, news groups, FTP, search tools. We're going to talk about the World Wide Web. And all of these are different things that you can do on the Internet, each with a specific end goal in mind. Each of these tasks has a specific purpose. And the first one we're going to talk about is email. And much like the name implies, it's sending mail electronically. What do you need to send a regular piece of mail? You need someone's address. You don't just guess it, they give it to you, and people will give you their email address. And it'll usually be in the format of some name that identifies you, the @ symbol, the little A with the circle around it, and then a name that identifies the computer where your email box resides. Much like if I was to send you a letter, I'd put your name on it, and then where you live at, where your mailbox resides. And email addresses have this same type of structure. Now, the addresses themselves, the part to the right of that @ symbol, that identifies the place where your email box is, and that'll be something like AOL.com or Dave.org. And they end in .com, which means it's a company, .org, which means it's an organization, .mil means it's a military organization, .gov means it's a government organization. So the address, much like your address, tells a little bit about where you live. It maybe has an apartment number or a floor number or something like that. The email address, by looking at it, you can tell a little bit about who you're sending the email to. Now, email, although it is like sending regular mail, it's not like sending regular mail in an envelope. It's like sending a postcard. Because the way this mail gets around is you compose your mail, you send it out over the Internet, and it just bounces around until it finds the mailbox. And if it bounces into a computer that doesn't have your mailbox, that computer says, oh, that person's not here, and sends it on its way. But if the person running that computer was slightly devious, has some time on their hands, was a little bored, they could put their Ethernet card or their modem into promiscuous mode and read everything coming into them, even if it was not addressed to them. Just like when you send a postcard, everyone along the way can read it. So there's some issues, some security issues with sending email. And it leads to, well, what if I want to send some secure message? I don't want it to be a postcard. I want it to be wrapped in an envelope. You can purchase or get for free off the Internet encryption programs. And you'll need an email program, something to compose your email and send it out. And your email program may or may not support encryption. And encryption is simply the process of taking your message and jubbling it all up so that only the intended recipient can untangle it and actually read it. But know that unless your email supports that type of action, and unless you actually turn it on at the time, then your email could be read by anybody. Now, I'm going to show you how to do email. I'm going to show you one specific program that uses email. But first, I want to give you what I consider an extreme example. Consider this. Business people especially have to be in touch. So the advent of the pay telephone was absolutely spectacular. Because now, no matter where you were, you could drop a quarter in a slot, or actually I guess it was a nickel or a dime, and you could communicate to somebody. The next level past that was beepers. So now when your beeper went off, you know to go to the payphone and call your office. The next level past that was pagers. So now you get paged and it gives you the number. And now you don't go to the payphone and call the office. You go and call whatever number was on your pager. Then came cellular phones. So now wherever you are, you don't even have to stop at the payphone. You can talk on the cellular phone and exchange voice communication. And now we have email, and you can send video, graphics, sound, or text. And my extreme example is this. I'm a busy business person. And I've got a palm-top computer. And you see them around, little bitty computers. And that computer has a cellular modem. And now I can go onto the internet from anywhere with my little palm-top and my cellular modem and check my email. Maybe in the middle of a business meeting, so that my secretary doesn't have to interrupt the meeting just to tell me my flight's been delayed or canceled or moved back or moved forward or some such thing. Or if I'm sitting at an airport, I can get that extremely important piece of information, and not just a phone call that says, we're going to send it to you via overnight. It says, we've sent it to you, and now you can actually look at it right now. So it's email, electronic mail, and it makes all other mail look like snail mail. And you'll actually hear that term. In fact, there might be someone right now checking their email with their palm-top computer. The point is, you could do it anywhere. You can also, maybe not take it back a step and not use such an extreme example, go into an airport with your computer, and a lot of the pay phones now have little data jacks, and you can plug in and go onto the internet. And I was fumbling around trying to do this with cables and stuff, and a guy saw me, he said, maybe I can help you. And he pulled out a little thing about this big, and it was indeed a cellular modem. And as our plane was boarding, we went onto the internet, we both checked our email, and I slept sound. I slept like a baby that flight because I knew that there was nothing important in my email, and it would put me to rest. As opposed, I could have called my voicemail, and if there would have been a document waiting for me, I wouldn't have been able to see it immediately. So those are some extreme examples. Here's a less extreme example. My cousin's in Australia. 17-hour time difference, $5 a minute to talk. So I can communicate to people all over the world very economically by sending email over the internet. Let's actually look at email. And I'm going to use a particular program here, and they're different email programs. I'm going to use one particular one here, and really it's a lot like driving a car. It doesn't matter what kind of car you drive, all cars pretty much drive the same. But they all have their little idiosyncrasies. You've got to flip on the wipers and figure out how to flip over the tape deck and how to turn on the lights. But the fundamentals are the same. So what I'm going to show you here may be a little different than your email program, but fundamentally it's all the same. I've already signed on to my service provider, and I'm on my account. And here it says you have mail. Now your email program may say you have email as soon as you sign on, or you may have to go to some place and say, check my email to see if you've got something waiting. But I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to check my email. And sure enough, I've got a couple of pieces of email waiting for me. And if I click on one, it opens it up, and I'll be able to read this electronic message that somebody sent me. And in this case, what we're looking at is a newsletter. Because I have subscribed to a newsletter, and every so often, the newsletter, instead of getting sent to me, to my home, where I never am anyway, it goes out and comes to my email box. The particular newsletter that I've subscribed to here happens to be an internet newsletter. So it's a good thing it comes via email, because if it came by snail mail, by the time I got it, everything might have changed. When I read my email, you can see here, I could click on reply, send my sender a reply. I could click on forward and send it off to somebody else. Maybe I know that you would be interested in this information as well, so I might just want to forward it off to you. Let me give you an example of you sending email. This is an example I've shown you here of retrieving email. And I went to my menu and I chose Compose Email. And again, how you do it on your account might be slightly different. There might be an icon that you click on or some menu command from which you would send your email. And you'll see here it says to. And to is where I type in the address of the person I'm sending this to. Again, to the left of the @ sign is the part of the address that identifies that specific user, that person. And the information over here to the right specifies where their mailbox is. So I put to. And I could separate this by commas and send it to a lot of people. I could CC it to somebody. Some of your email programs, now mine doesn't, but some of them support a BCC, a blind carbon copy. So you can forward it off to somebody and the recipient won't know that a carbon copy got sent to somebody else. And all of this may seem very familiar to you if you've worked in an office. It's the same type of terminology. Now we've just kind of translated it to email. I'll give it a subject because normally people will get a summary of their email. It won't just say, here's a letter. It'll say, here's a letter, and this is the subject. So I give it some meaningful subject, and then I go down in here, and I type away. And when I'm done, I click on Send. My email program, and most real good ones have this feature, has a feature called Send Later. Because remember, while you're on the internet, you're paying. Maybe you're not paying as much as for a phone call, but you're still paying. So a good technique that will save you money is to compose your email offline while you're not connected and have a program that will automatically send all your email at once as soon as you connect. So you're not connected and sending email and composing. You can compose offline, think about it, and then, boom, go online for maybe a couple of minutes and send all your email off at once. Email that took you maybe a couple of hours to compose. So you could send or save significant amount of money. You also might want to get an email program that supports that same type of action, but as retrieving. So I went in, and I'm actually online, and I retrieved a message, and I looked at it. Had I been really thinking about my wallet, I would have gone on just long enough to download all of my email, and I would have read it offline, and I would have composed my responses offline and then signed back online for a minute to send all my responses. So that's a management technique. The example I used with the email that I received was a newsletter. Now, I had to subscribe to that newsletter, and now we're talking about a specific part of email, and we're talking about mailing lists. You can put yourself on a mailing list, and you may all be familiar with this concept. You put yourself on a mailing list, and you get mail sent to you. Well, I signed up for this mailing list that's information about the World Wide Web, and periodically, about once a week, I get sent this information on the World Wide Web electronically. To sign up for that, I saw a little advertisement someplace that said, to subscribe to this mail list, send email to, and it gave me an address to send email to, and it said, and in the subject, put these exact words. And either in the subject or in the body of my email, I put some exact words like subscribe email, and then my email address. And it's got a robot program that reads all this incoming mail, and anything that it gets that in the subject says subscribe, it automatically puts you on the list, and you're on the list until you send them another piece of email that says unsubscribe. And it varies depending on what kind of list. You'll get instructions. You'll get an email address to send to, and you'll get the instructions for what to put in the body of the text to subscribe yourself, and then you also want to make sure you get the instructions on how to unsubscribe, because this can become a big burden. You could get a flood of mail that you have to sort through. So one technique for managing your mail is to actually have two internet addresses. One that you give out for receiving mail, and the one that you just give to friends and business acquaintances and stuff like that. So that's a management technique for working with your email. And you may be familiar with this concept. Oftentimes large corporations, if you send them mail, you will write on it, or they'll have you write on it, attention some department. This is the same type of concept where you have two different email addresses. The other mail list that I subscribe to is Microsoft's Win News. So I am constantly getting the most up-to-date information on the Windows that there is. Before the news people get it, before it comes out in the major media, I get it through my newsletter, because as soon as they compose it and send it out, it comes to me, and I've got it really essentially in seconds. So we've looked at a demonstration of email, considering that your email program may be a little different. We've looked at an extreme example of how it could help a really busy business person, and a more moderate example of just how maybe you could use it not only to communicate with your family all over the world or all over the country, but also business people that are traveling around. We've also looked at mailing lists. Something different from email, different from mailing lists, is news groups. I like to describe news groups as a topical corkboard. Imagine corkboards all around us. And one corkboard said computer stuff, and one corkboard said business stuff, and one corkboard said classified ads, and one corkboard said recipes. And people put messages on little 3x5 cards, tack them up to these corkboards. And then if you're interested in getting some new recipes, you'd go over to the recipe corkboard and you'd read through this. Not unlike an academic journal, where people are constantly posting information and it gets reviewed. One neat thing about news groups, though, is you can go up to one of these posted notes and you can reply to it. So you can post a note that is a reply to some other note that's been posted. Now, in your news group program, the program that allows you to read the news groups, will normally show you all the messages in that news group in chronological order, from the last one that was posted to the earliest one that was posted. But also, messages show up in what's called threads. That is, I might have a message that is a response to a message that you placed. And chronologically, they don't come right next to each other. But it would make more sense for me to read your message and then skip down a couple of messages and read the response to your message. So a good news group program will allow you to read the threads of conversation. And you may have heard the term threads of conversation. Conversations have a thread. News group develops along threads. Let's look at some news groups. My news group program allows me to look at all of the news groups, pick ones that I am interested in, and add them to a list or subscribe to them. And here I'm looking at the different categories of news groups. There are business news groups. There are computer news groups. There are entertainment news groups. Whatever hobby you have, there's a news group for it. What's neat about news groups is you may share a hobby that only 100 other people in the entire world share. And they're all in different locations. And you could never, ever talk to these people or exchange information. But with news groups, you can. It also allows people in business to constantly get the most up-to-date thinking on a particular subject. News groups is where information, the rawest, most up-to-date information is right now. Before you hear things on the news or read them in a paper, you'll find them in a news group. Let's look at one that is the computer news groups. And one in here that I find especially interesting is comp.jobs. Much like your email had addresses, news groups have a specific name that identifies that news group. And what you're doing, remember that the internet is just files, ways to look for those files, and ways to retrieve those. You're going to a specific computer where all the messages for this news group reside. And its name, the name of the news group, indicates where it's located. And here are a whole list of news groups. Comp.ai, artificial intelligence. I might want to get involved in that one. I think I could use some. Comp.bugs. You can read about bugs in software, because there are two types of software, buggy software and less buggy software. And here's a place where you can read about bugs in software. And if you go down here, there are just a ton of them that you could look at. hardware, home, human factors. And you could go through and read these different news groups. And I want to actually show you a specific news group and actually how the threads of conversation pile up, show you a specific news group and show you how those threads of conversation progress. Here I'm going to a news group that's called Computer Folklore. And you could click on a message. We'll open up this message and we'll read this message. And it's got a message here. And I could click on Next. And if I click on Next, it's not going to take me to the next posting chronologically. It's going to take me to the response to this one. And that's what I mean by threads. And I could follow this thread of conversation even though they were posted in not necessarily chronologically sequential order. There is so much information in news groups, it's a little bit like drinking water out of a fire hose. Next thing I want to talk about is FTP. It stands for File Transfer Protocol. And it's another way to get files off of another computer. Now, you can go to a computer that's an FTP server. That means it's sitting there on the internet, and its only job is to let you look at all the files on it, and should you request, it'll send you a file. And it will send you that file via this file transfer protocol, which is so that any computer, Macintosh or IBM or Unix, can retrieve the file. And why would you want to retrieve a file and bring it onto your hard drive? Well, maybe it's a graphic that you think's pretty. Maybe it's a bug fix. Maybe you've got a piece of that software that's of the more buggy variety, and you need to contact the software company and get the patch or the fix or the little Band-Aid that fixes that program. And many of you may have had to do this by calling up a phone number, long distance, waiting on hold for 20 or 30 minutes, if you're lucky, asking them to mail it to you via snail mail. Or you could FTP, you could go to their FTP site and download the patch. And maybe it's not a patch, maybe it's a list of questions or a FAQ, frequently asked question list. Maybe it's a document you could put into your word processor. It could be anything, including something that's completely useless. For instance, as an IBM user, I could go and FTP a Macintosh file. It'd be on my computer. There's nothing on my computer that would understand it. So not everything is useful for you. If you were in a shell account, you would have to type in the Unix commands to go and grab the file. If you're familiar with DOS, then you know that there are commands for listing what's on a drive, doing a directory. If you've got a good FTP program that's visual, it will visually show you what's on a drive and allow you to get it. Now, when you go to one of these other computers, it wants to know who you are. It wants to know who is visiting the site. Normally, and this is not tricky, this is accepted procedure, you can type your name in as anonymous. And then when it asks for a password, you type in your email address. A good program, a good FTP program, and consider you need a different piece of software for each of these things we're talking about right now. A good FTP program will make all that transparent to you. It'll type in anonymous for you, and it will put in your password for you. And I'm going to go to a specific FTP site at a major software company. And here are a whole list of FTP sites. Now again, if I was just at a prompt and I didn't have such sophisticated software, I would have to type in commands to navigate me to this computer. Then I'd have to type in commands to look and see what are all the files on its hard drive. And then I would have to type in commands to retrieve a file. Well, with a good graphical program like this, point and click or point and shoot is what a lot of people call it. you can just navigate by pointing and clicking. And that's what we're doing now, is we're going to this major software company and we're looking at their FTP server. If you do this at certain times of the day, and there may be a lot of traffic on the internet, it could take a while to get connected. If you do it at 4 o'clock in the morning when everyone's asleep, it won't take as long. And here's a little message. It says, welcome to the ftp.microsoft.com. I'm at Microsoft's FTP server. It says, please enter your full email name as your password. Well, all I have to do is click on OK, and my software does that for me. And most likely, your software will do that too. But know that the software is doing something for you here. So I've clicked on OK. I'm going to their FTP server. And here I get a message that says, a request to the host has taken longer than expected. Select OK to acknowledge this message. That means there's too much traffic there. Come back later. And it's something you will encounter. It's a busy signal. Call back later. It means too many people are trying to get to it. So here we are looking at a list of the files, and you're looking at that and you're thinking, oh my goodness, it looks like a completely different language. I'm sure there's something in there that I could use, but where is it? There are tons of files in there. Well, if you did call the company, they would tell you what file you're going to look for, and you would look for that specific file. Or one of the files on here would be an index of everything that's here. And here you can see this file normally has a very intuitive name like index. And I just double-click on index. Now again, if I was doing it with commands, I'd have to look at all the files, and I'd have to type in some crazy command that copied that index file to my computer. But I'm not doing that. I've got this point-and-click software here that downloads it just by me clicking on it. So I click on Download Now. And now my software is going to ask me, where do I want to put it on my computer? And this will vary a little bit from your computer to my computer to your friend's computer, depending on what kind of computer you have and what type of software you have. But the next step is, once you indicate that you want to receive it via FTP, where are you going to put it? And I would click where I want to put it, click on OK, and it goes and retrieves that file, and now I have it. So FTP can be very useful. Again, you can get useful files quickly. You don't have to wait for people to mail them to you. And it's not necessarily software fixes and things like that, although that's a component of it. It's new software programs, updates. There are some computer companies that have an FTP server, and the day the software gets updated, instead of you having to wait for them to send you the update, you can go and get it. Let's talk a little bit about search tools. Because what if you don't know the name of the file? No one gave you a name of the file. You just know that you want to look for some type of file that helps you keep track of your butterfly collection. There are search tools. Remember again that the internet is files on the internet, ways to look for those files, and methods for retrieving them. We're going to look at now ways to look for files, or ways to search for files. And there are three common methods. There are many different methods. The first one is Gopher. It was developed at the University of Minnesota, and their mascot is the Golden Gophers. And they wrote this little program that sits on top of the FTP server, and it just provides a table of contents for this one particular FTP site. Another search method is called Veronica. And that stands for Very Easy, Rodent-Oriented Information Network Assistant. And that you can use to search all Gophers. Remember, a Gopher is for one particular computer, and that'll tell you the FTP files on that computer. And then you could do a wider search using Veronica to search all the Gophers, to find Gophers that might have files that would help you find your stamp collecting information. And another search tool is called WAIS, W-A-I-S, and it stands for Wide Area Information Search. And that is to search the entire internet by keywords. So whereas a Gopher is like a table of contents, Waze is like an index. Some servers or some computers support all three of these. Some support only one, some support none. And actually, in the program I have here, it shows you a hybrid. It combines all three of them together. And you could click there, and through a menu option, search for stamp collecting. And maybe an option off of stamp collecting would be programs. And under programs, it would be organization. And then it would list a list of programs for stamp collecting organization. Depending on what type of account you have, you may be able to Gopher, and then separate from that do a Veronica, and separate from that do a Waze. Or you may have what I have, which it just kind of all combines them together, which is a little more intuitive. And here you have a menu system, and I could search aeronautics and astronomy, agriculture, biology, computing. And it's using Veronica, Gopher, and Waze to help me search. And you just click, and you keep clicking on things that look interesting to you until it finally shows you a file. And then knowing that file's name, you could use FTP to retrieve it. What's really exciting about the internet, though, is the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web takes everything we've talked about so far and ties it in together and kind of integrates it. It puts a graphical front end on the internet. And if you're familiar with Windows and DOS, it's much like Windows sits on top of DOS and puts a graphical front end on top of DOS. So does the World Wide Web put a graphical front end onto the internet. Let me show you some examples of this. Now, consider again that the internet is always files on some computer, ways for us to search for those files, and methods for retrieving them. The World Wide Web is just special documents on computers. And it would have to be just like you have an FTP server that serves out files. You could have a World Wide Web server that serves out these special World Wide Web documents. Each one has its own particular address. Kind of like you have an email address and news groups have a particular address that specifies what they are. Actually, all of these different addresses, they're called URLs. That stands for Uniform Resource Locator. And that's a term that you will definitely hear. Someone will say, here's a URL, go check it out. And that URL may be an FTP site, it may be a news group, or it may be a World Wide Web homepage. And just like you need a special email program to read your email and send it, and a special news group program to do news groups, a special FTP program to do FTP, you need a World Wide Web browser to browse these World Wide Web documents. And they're called HTML documents, another term you will hear. That just stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And what that means is inside these documents that you'll read, you can click on something and it will zoom you out to that computer. Thus the term hypertext. Let's go look at some specific World Wide Web pages. Here I'm going to the Microsoft World Wide Web page. And from the Microsoft World Wide Web page, I can click on specific things and go out to another computer that has related information, maybe clear across the country or clear around the world. I can go to their knowledge base and search for, instead of searching using Gopher and Veronica and all that, I can go to the knowledge base and search using the World Wide Web, search their knowledge base, which is all this knowledge they've accumulated for all of their programs. So instead of sending some email to somebody and they say, go check this news group, and in that news group someone says, go FTP this file, I'm kind of doing it all at once. So here I am, I'm trying to load this Microsoft page, and today is a very busy day at Microsoft. The traffic there is busy. And as the little thing turns, that means it's trying to download this page. And since it's a busy day at Microsoft, it might take a while. So you might want to stop and come back later. All your World Wide Web browsers will have this common interface. Mine has a little A that turns. Yours may have an N that turns. But essentially, much like driving a car, the essential elements are the same. As long as that A is turning, as long as that thing turns, it means the page is downloading. A good World Wide Web browser will download the text before it gets the graphics. So as you read the text, you can look at the graphics. Also, the World Wide Web browser will keep a list of all the places that you've been. And you can normally click it down, and it'll show you all the places that you've been, and you could click on back and jump back to the last place that you were. And another thing that is a good feature of a World Wide Web browser is once you get to a place that's really neat, you can add that to some type of list of places or a menu so that in the future you don't have to type in its long name. You can just jump back to it. Or as more commonly is the case, as you're jumping from web page to web page, you don't have any idea how you got here, and you can never get back to it again. So once you get to that place, you may want to add that to your favorite places list or a hot menu or something like that. If it takes too long and you chicken out, you click on stop. And you can go somewhere else. That's a software company. But here's a completely different World Wide Web page. I'm going to the Civil War World Wide Web page. And I can completely research the Civil War. I wish I would have had this when I was in junior high. My reports would have been amazing. So if I wanted to do some research and I knew the address for the Civil War homepage, I could go there and I could research the entire Civil War. And it may have links to it, and I could click on these links and it would take me to completely other computers in completely different spots with related information. That's why it's called hypertext, because I can click and it doesn't just take me to some more information on this computer. It takes me to some other computer completely somewhere else. Here's an interesting thing. We've looked at a computer company's World Wide Web page. I've told you a little bit about researching maybe the Civil War. Let's go to a World Wide Web page for an individual, one person. This is a grad student in upstate New York. He's got his own personal World Wide Web homepage. And he'll tell you the projects that he's currently working on. And if you click on one of those projects, it'll jump you out to the World Wide Web page for that project. Here's an interesting aspect of it. You can read all about it, and it says where I am, and right now I'm doing electronic publishing at this company, and you can click on it and go to that company's World Wide Web page, and it says I'm working on my thesis and looking for a real job, and you can click there on looking for a real job. And you click on looking for a real job, and it shows you his resume. So here's his resume. And certain aspects of his resume are highlighted, like his name. And here, if I click on his name, it brings up my email program with his address filled in, and now I can send him email. And that's what I meant, how the World Wide Web is tying everything together. Because also in these World Wide Web pages, you'll click on a file, and it will FTP it for you. And you can do searches instead of using Veronica and Waze. So this is how it ties it all together. The common part of a resume, common aspect of all resumes, is my work experience. And you can look at his work experience and click on any one of these companies, and it'll go out to a whole other computer and give you information on that company. 8 hours after he posted this on the internet, he got a bite. Someone offered him an interview. And there are actually entire career forums on the internet. How would you get to them? You'd go to some type of search page. And I've taken you to a couple of different websites. I've made reference to a few. How did I find them? I went to a search site. It's a web page from which I can search for other web pages. And I'm going to go to this search site. There are tons of things I could search for, like the Library of Congress. Is there any greater research resource than the Library of Congress? How do I know how to get there? I'd go to my search page, type in Library of Congress. What if I want to look for a job or maybe look to hire some people? I go to a search page, and there are many different search pages also, and type in careers, jobs, something like that. I want to go to a search page and type in internet, because the whole point here is to learn about the internet. I'm going to use the internet to learn about the internet. And in fact, I'm not even going to type in search. It's already got an index here listed for me, and I can type on computers and the internet, and it's going to take me to a whole other page of computers and the internet. It's going to go load up that page. Because I know enough about the internet to get on, but I want to know more. I want to get up to speed. You may be familiar with the feeling. What's your greatest resource for doing that? The internet. So now I've loaded a bunch of resources for computers and the internet. And there's art. That's a related topic. Computer science, computer questions, conferences. One of the options is internet. So I click on internet. Now, where have I gone? I've gone from the search page to a part about computers, to a part about computers and the internet. I'm on the third page. I'm jumping all around. I'm surfing around. What I'm trying to do is eventually, after I narrow this down enough, it's going to give me a list of specific places I can go on the internet to learn about the internet. And that's what it's doing right now, is it's loading in some places where I can learn more about the internet. But it doesn't have to be about the internet. It could be about careers or jobs or archaeology or cars, or maybe you have some little hobby that no one else in the world shares except for somebody on a mountaintop in Seattle. So now we get our search results, and it says Beginner's Guide to the Internet. And you can click on that and get a no high-tech terminology guide to the internet, a beginner's guide to the internet. And in fact, there are 5 or 10 or 15 documents on there that you can see that as a beginner you could click on and go get useful information. And one of them in parentheses there even says, no geekish terminology. So the internet in it of itself can be used to research the internet. And all you have to do is go to one of these search pages and start searching around. And as you search around, you'll bump into pages that are useful for you. Now, coming into this, you all knew what the internet was. You understood the internet. You even knew how to access it. But you still had that question that was, so what? How do I use it? How can I use it and get benefit from it? So we looked at email, constantly staying in contact. And if you've ever had a business deal go awry because of poor communication, you might find email especially appealing. We looked at news groups, so that you can constantly exchange ideas with people that think like you do or completely disagree with you do, but carry on conversations with people all over the world. We looked at FTP, which is this process of retrieving files. We looked at some of the search tools, Veronica, Gopher, Waze, that are methods for searching for files that we would FTP. And then we looked at the World Wide Web, which ties it all together, this graphical interface. And we saw how there are computer companies that have web pages, individuals that have web pages, using it for anything from marketing your concept to getting your feedback from the customer to just looking for a job to just searching so that you can learn more about the internet or anything, like maybe the Civil War or art or giving presentations or anything. So with that in mind, now you can go hit your search pages and you can start using the internet and gaining benefit from it, as opposed to just saying, well, now I'm on it. Now I've got the telephone. Who do I call? Now you have a little black book, a little address book of people to call. So, thank you.